Bun says, "Good morning. I miss you guys." All right. Are we ready for our read aloud? We are on this awesome book. Ooh, I might sneeze. Oh, buns fur in my face. All right, we are on chapter 7, and it is called The Runaway Chair. Any predictions? I'm sure you do have a few. Let's see if you are right. One morning, are you comfortable? Are you calm? I hope so. One morning, when the two children went down to their playroom to have a game with Chingy, the pixie, they found him fast asleep. "Wake up!" Peter cried, rolling him over, but Chingy did not wake up. He was breathing very deeply and had quite nice red cheeks, but he simply would not wake up. "What's the matter with him?" Molly said, puzzled. "Oh, he's just pretending," said Peter. "I'll get a wet sponge. He'll wake up soon then." But even the wet sponge did not wake him up. "There must be a spell on him or something," said Molly, rather frightened. "What shall we do, Peter? If only we knew where to get help. But we mustn't tell anyone about Chingy. He'd be so cross when he woke up, and we don't know how to find any fairies, or we would ask them for help." Suddenly, the wishing chair gave a creak, and Molly looked around. "It's growing its wings," she cried. "Don't let it fly away, Peter. We don't want an adventure without Chingy." Peter ran to the chair, but it dodged him and flew straight out of the door, its wings flapping swiftly. Peter stared at it in dismay. "Oh, Peter," said Molly, "isn't this dreadful? Here's Chingy under a spell or something, and now the chair's run away. What an unlucky day." "Well, it's gone," said Peter gloomily. "Now, what are we going to do about Chingy?" Just then there came the sound of a cautious tiptoe noise. Peter turned just in time to see an ugly goblin slipping out of the door. "I put him under the sleeping spell," shouted the goblin. "I meant to steal the chair before he woke up, but then you came. Now I'm going to find the chair, and if you don't find the way to wake up that pixie before 12 o'clock tonight, he will vanish altogether. Ho, ho." "Oh, horrible thing," said Molly as the goblin disappeared into the garden. "I suppose he will go after our chair and have it for himself. And here he's left Chingy in a magical sleep, and we don't know how to wake him up. If only we knew how to find a fairy that might help us." "I'll go and call for one in the garden," said Peter. So he went out and he called softly here and there, "Fairies, if you are there, come and help me." But he had no answer at all, and he sadly went back to the playroom where Molly sat there by the sleeping pixie. "No good," said Peter. I didn't see a single fairy. I really don't know what to do here. If only we had the chair, we could go off in it and find a fairy somewhere to help us," said Molly. "But even that's gone and left us run away on the very day that we needed its help." Uh-oh. Buns is drinking water. Stop. They went back to the house for dinner and for tea, and Mother exclaimed at their long faces. They very nearly told her about Chingy, but didn't like to, for they had solemnly promised the pixie never to mention his name to the grown-ups. Then it was their bedtime. Chingy was still asleep. I have to stop Buns from drinking this water. Stop drinking this water. Okay. She's not happy about that. Solemnly swore never to mention. Oh, it was their bedtime. When it was their bedtime, Chingy was fast asleep. Did you hear that? "Fancy, he hasn't had anything to eat all day," said Molly. "Oh, Peter, Do you really think he'll disappear at midnight if we can't wake him up? We must wake him up, said Peter. So he got 2 drums and 2 trumpets, and he and Molly made so much noise, as much as they could, until Jane, the housemaid, was sent down to the garden to stop them. But Chinky didn't even stir in his sleep. Then they poured cold water all down his neck, but that only made him get wet and didn't make him flicker so much as an eyelash. Then they found a hen's feather, set it alight, and let it smolder just under the pixie's nose. But the strong smell did not make him turn away. He slept on peacefully. A bell rang in the distance. Oh dear, there's our bedtime bell, said Molly in dismay. Peter, I'm coming back to the playground tonight somehow. There surely must be something we can do. We've tried everything, said Peter, and he looked miserable. Then they went off to bed, first covering up Chinky warmly. Hopefully they dried him off. In an hour's time, they were back again in their dressing gowns. They had slipped out of bed, run out to the garden door, and gone to the playground without being seen. This is making him wet with a sponge. Chinky was still fast asleep. Molly looked at the clock. 8:30, she said. Oh dear. They tried to think of more ways to wake him up, the sleeping pixie, and Molly squeezed a sponge over his head with icy cold water and then with hot water, but neither of them had any effect at all. The hands of the clock stole round and round, and at last it was only 10 minutes until midnight. The children were quite in despair. Suddenly, what's going to happen? There came a curious sound of knocking at the door. It sounded more like kicking. Peter ran out to it. Outside was their wishing chair, wet through, for it was raining. It had found the door shut and had kicked at it with one of its front legs. Sitting in it was a jolly-faced gnome with a silvery beard and an enormous nose, 2 pairs of spectacles. We know what those are, right? Glasses. And a large umbrella to keep off the rain. Who are you? Said Peter in surprise. Oh, don't bother him with questions, said Molly anxiously. He's a fairy of some sort. Perhaps he has come to make Chinky better. Yes, said the gnome, putting on a 3rd pair of spectacles. This chair knew where I lived and flew 133 miles to fetch me. I am only here just in time. There are only 7 minutes until midnight. What time is that? Think about it. 7 minutes until midnight. 7 minutes till 12 means it must be 11:53. Oh man, my allergies are killing me this morning. Sorry. Okay. Oh, do be quick. The little gnome doctor rolled up his sleeves, took a towel and a piece of soap from the air, and took a towel, not a tower, and a piece of soap from the air, and with them washed Chinky's face very carefully. Then he brushed the sleeping pixie's eyes with a peacock feather that he also took most conveniently from the air, and smeared them with a peculiar-smelling yellow ointment. Do hurry, said Molly. It's almost midnight. The clock is going to strike. It's 1 minute fast, said the doctor. He took a black ball from the air, opened it, put a blue powder inside it, struck a match, and put it into the black ball, and at once there was a loud explosion, and the playroom rocked and shook. Smoke covered the whole room. It had a very pleasant smell. When it cleared, the 2 children saw to their delight that Chinky was sitting up, looking most astonished. Who made that horrible noise? He said crossly. Hello, doctor. What are you doing here? Just going. So, goodbye, grinned the little gnome. See you someday. He jumped into the wishing chair, which at once flew off with him again. Chinky ran his finger around his collar and frowned. Who has been making me wet? He asked. Oh, Chinky, don't be cross, begged Molly. We've been quite anxious about you. A goblin put you under a sleepy spell, and the clever wishing chair went to fetch the gnome doctor. that you saw, only just in time, too. So that is it, said Chinky. No wonder I feel so hungry. I've been asleep all day, I suppose. Can you find me something to eat? There are some buns and apples in the cupboard, said Peter, delighted to see Chinky awake. We'll have a fine feast. And so they did. And they didn't go back to bed until the rooster crowed the next morning. No wonder they slept late that next morning. Chinky didn't, though. He was up bright and early because he had had quite enough sleeping. And that is the end of that chapter. All right, hit me up with a problem and a solution and the characters. You have a new character. Does he have a name? I don't think he had a name. He was a gnome doctor with no name. And clearly, the wishing chair is now a legit character because he is problem solving. All right, I will see you guys next time. Draw me a picture too. I'm going to check these tomorrow. All right.